Hello, we welcome you to this Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. My name is Goodluck Ofebu, and this is my wife.
My name is Saul-David, and thank you for joining us again for this episode of our Bible study.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and we are going to continue with our study series on the king and the people, focusing on the life of David during the period from the time he was anointed to be king of Israel to the time he was actually made king. We're looking at this period of his life to try to learn what he did as he waited for God's time to become king of Israel. Well, we're going to look at an important aspect of the interaction between him and Saul. We're going to look at that. We've discussed this in different ways, but in this Bible study we'll look at the David-Saul interactions when David realized that Saul was seeking his life. And we are going to study this to try to learn something about interactions between a mentor and a mentee when the mentor turns deadly, when the mentor turns into an enemy of the mentee. And this is really, this David-Saul interaction can be looked at from that viewpoint. David wasn't exactly, Saul wasn't a mentor for David, but indeed he was, because he was already king. He was very high he was the king, he was the commander of the army, he set up the army. He has a lot of fighting experience when David came into his service. So David was in a position to learn from him, to grow under him, and then eventually get to where God wanted him to get in that relationship. But Saul, who was in the position of being David's mentor, turned into an enemy of his mentee, David. And we know what David did. We're going to look carefully at what he did to try to understand, because this is a relationship that is real among present human beings, because especially in the areas of business, in the areas of politics, and in so many other areas where a mentor and a mentee, the relationship between a mentor and a mentee evolves, and at some point changes from a mentor-mentee relationship to an enemy type relationship. So we look at what David did, because he was at the receiving end, and expect that we will learn something from there that that people can use in their present day relationships. Honey, do you want to say something?
Yes, as always, the Bible is full of accounts of events that God has ordained for us to learn from. And it will be interesting. It is interesting that this Bible study is bringing out something that happens both in leadership of any sort, where there is a leader and a follower, or a mentor and a mentee. Like my husband has already said, it happens in politics, it happens in business, it happens in most careers, when you have one more experienced leading, overseeing one that is less experienced, with the hope of nurturing the less experienced to grow up, in that particular career. And things can quickly turn very sour. So it will be interesting to see what God has put in this particular event for us to learn from.
Yeah. Okay, so what we are going to learn, we will use David-Saul interactions as an example of a mentor versus mentee relationship that turned deadly against the mentee. It is that second part, the fact that the relationship changed and turned deadly, and the mentee had to take actions to preserve his own life. We will recall that David thrived in the military service under Saul. His reputation grew widely. He expected that he was going to grow through the service and use it to build up himself to eventually become king of Israel. But it didn't quite work out that way. Yes, he gained useful experience there, but at some point he had to leave, and the reason he had to leave was this change in the relationship between him and Saul. He departed when he recognized that he could not contain Saul's threat to his life. This makes an important point, but we'll return to the point later on. But one thing we see is that David's departure from Saul saved his life. It was critical. If he survived because he departed from Saul. We can say that if he stayed, because Saul was determined to kill David and had the power to kill David, so if David was within his reach, I believe he would have killed David. So David saved his life by leaving Saul. And we'll see that as soon as David left, Saul declared war, open war against David. Our reading will come from 1 Samuel chapter 23, but we'll recall earlier, because this change in their relationship actually occurred before the passage, before the events recorded in the passage that we're going to read. Well, recall, as we said, that David thrived in Saul's military service. His reputation as an effective leader grew in Israel, grew widely. So he wanted to stay there. He believed that growing in the service was good for him. It was a key aspect of his becoming king, as he was anointed to be. But at some point he recognized that Saul wanted to kill him. And he didn't leave as soon as this happened. Remember, there were at least 2 occasions where Saul threw the spear at him and he ducked. So looking at that, we can say that the first time he recognized, he probably believed that he could contain the threat, that he could, just by being vigilant, that he could remain in Saul's service, remain loyal to Saul, but be vigilant, so that anytime Saul came after him, that he would be able to take evasive action. So that was the first thing. Then at some point he realized that he could not contain it. I think Saul became more explicit about his intention to kill David. We've gone through this. And then David departed from Saul. So we'll see there two phases of action from David. The first one is containment. He wanted to stay put in his service. He wanted to continue to receive the service he was receiving under Saul, or rather receive the training that he was, the mentoring that he was receiving under Saul. Saul probably was not actively mentoring him, but he was learning in the process of being in Saul's service. So he wanted to remain there and still deal with the threat. But that's the first phase. The second phase is when he realized that was not going to work. That Saul was very serious about killing him, and that if he stayed within proximity of Saul, that Saul would one day kill him. at that point, he decided to put a distance between him and Saul. And we'll see the incidents that showed how he tried to maintain that distance. So he departed from Saul to save his life. Well, as soon as he departed, Saul declared war against David. Of course, this came out clearly when he realized that David and his people and his followers were in the city of Keilah. Keilah was a gated city. Remember, the Philistines attacked Keilah, and David sought guidance from God and then took his followers into Keilah and fought the Philistines, defeated them, and chased them out of after that place. Well, they were still there when the information went to Saul that, hey, David and his men are in Keilah. And Saul rejoiced, saying, oh, Keilah is a gated city, so it had gates, and the only way you can go out is through the gate. So Saul felt that David had put himself in a trap. So he mustered his army to go and besiege the city. And as he was doing that, word came to David that Saul was preparing to come to him. So one of the things we'll see here as we read the passages is that both Saul and David had intelligence sources on each other. It may be that they deliberately planted spies, or it may be that somehow they made it known to people that there is a reward if you bring useful information from the other side. Whichever way it happened, we don't know. But what we know, and this comes out clearly from the accounts, is that each of them received information about each other's action. So we look at this from the point of view of David, who was under threat from Saul. Is that he was, part of what he was doing was collecting information from the enemy side. What kind of network he used to collect the information, we don't know, but from time to time, people would tell him what Saul was doing. And from time to time, he has ways of sending message to people that may help him or something, and we'll see evidence of that. Anyway, let us read the first part of this from 1 Samuel chapter 23, verses 7 through 13. And this is about the siege of Keilah, when Saul realized that David was in Keilah.
So we're reading 1 Samuel chapter 23 from verse 7, reading from the New King James Version. And Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah. So Saul said, God has delivered him into my hand, for he has shut himself in by entering a town that has gates and bars. Then Saul called all the people together for war to go down to Keilah to besiege David and his men. When David knew that Saul plotted evil against him, he said to Abiathar the priest, bring the ephod here. Then David said, O Lord God of Israel, your servant has certainly heard that Saul seeks to come to Keilah to destroy the city for my sake. Will the men of Keilah deliver me into his hand? Will Saul come down, as your servant has heard? O Lord God of Israel, I pray, tell your servant. And the Lord said, he will come. He will come down. Then David said, will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Saul? And the Lord said, they will deliver you. Verse 13, so David and his men, about 600, arose and departed from Keilah and went wherever they could go. Then it was told Saul that David had escaped from Keilah, so he halted the expedition.
Well, yeah, I put some notes here, but there are some things we need to we learn from this reading. In fact, this reading I think has told the whole story we wanted to tell tonight. And one is that, as I mentioned before, David had sources of information. He had ways of learning what Saul was doing. So that was part of his strategy. He wanted to know. Remember, Saul was after him. Saul wanted to kill him. Saul used to be his mentor. The relationship has gone sour. So as part of his defense, as part of his protection against himself, he made sure he has sources of information so that he would know what the mentor was planning, to the extent that that his informants could tell him. So that's one important thing. Another one, of course, is that he stayed close to God. Whatever, he sought God's guidance in something. In the case of Keilah, the Bible doesn't tell us all this, but as you go through this story, you see that David was actually wondering whether to stay and hide. He didn't want to fight Saul. He didn't want to fight Saul. We'll see this. It's clear in some places that he recognized Saul was too powerful for him. But more important, there is some other reason that we'll study in the future Bible study, that David had such respect for Saul's position as God's anointed king of Israel that he didn't want to kill Saul. But let's leave it at that. We'll discuss that more. So he didn't really want to fight Saul. But in the city of Keilah, he had the option of either getting out of the city or staying and hiding from place to place. And that's why he wondered, will these people give me up? Then he asked God, will these people give me up? Can I hide here? If I hide, would they look the other way or help me hide? And then God said, well, they'll give you up. So hiding in the city was no longer an option. And that's when he picked up and ran with his men. The fact that he picked up and ran tells us also that his way of staying alive was to keep a certain minimum distance between him and Saul. He wanted to stay beyond Saul's reach. So either he will hide in this. He evaluated hiding in the city, found that won't work. Then the next option is get up and leave. He didn't want to fight Saul. This is not about Saul and David, remember. It is about a mentor-mentee relationship that has turned sour, that has turned deadly against the mentee. So we'll learn how David reacted when he recognized this. Now at Keilah, he was concerned about himself and his followers. He was concerned about the city. But I think all the time his mind was on how to avoid Saul, how to stay away from Saul. So the siege on Keilah didn't happen because David and his men left, and of course you can see as soon as they left, Saul was informed. So Saul had his own informants, no doubt. Then David and his men escaped into the wilderness, and Saul searched for him frantically. He looked everywhere. He talked to all his informants. Eventually, they gave him information, but it took a while. Meanwhile, David himself was visited by his friend Jonathan. The Bible doesn't tell us how the information came to Jonathan, but his father was looking for David, couldn't find David, but it was so easy for him to find David. That tells me that maybe David sent message to him. David knew he could trust Jonathan. So what that is telling us is David had ways of sending message. even when he was hiding from Saul, he had ways of sending message to people he could trust. So he probably sent message to Jonathan. Jonathan went and visited him, strengthened him spiritually, and at that point, told David, said, "Look, don't worry, my father will not be able to kill you, because I know that you are going to be the next king of Israel, and I would like to be your second." Yeah. And in fact, he told David that even his father knew, that even his father had realized that David would be the next king of Israel. Now, of course, while David and his men were hiding, some of Saul's informants went and told him that where David was, and Saul came very close. He mustered his men, went after David with full force, and came very close to actually running into David and his men. But at this point, God stepped in, because the Philistines attacked Israel, and messengers came as Saul was closing in on David in the wilderness. Messengers came and they informed him that his country was under attack, so he turned around and went to fight the Philistines. Let us read a number of passages, verses 14 to 17, 19 to 20, and 25 to 29.
1 Samuel 23, verse 14. This is from the NIV. David stayed in the wilderness strongholds and in the hills of the desert of Ziph. Day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. "Don't be afraid," he said. "My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this."
So Jonathan encouraged David, but you could see here David accepted the encouragement. The message was, "Don't worry, my father will not hurt you." So if you look at it, being a spiritual person, one way David could have interpreted this is, you don't need to worry, just, God will take care of it. My father will never be able to kill you. But that's not the message he got. What he got was a message of, look, God is with you, and he will protect you, he will guide, and he knew that God would protect him through the actions he took, through the things he did, because God has given you human skills to do certain things to help yourself. And of course, when he needs to step in, he will step in, but there are things he expects you to do. David understood this, so he took whatever action he could take to obtain information, to learn what Saul was doing, and then to plan his move so he would be ahead of Saul, he would be away from Saul. He wanted to be at a certain minimum distance from Saul, and that was critical in saving his life.
So verse 19 of 1 Samuel 23. The Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Is not David hiding among us in the strongholds of Horesh, on the hill of Hakilah, south of Jeshimon? Now, your majesty, come down whenever it pleases you to do so, and we will be responsible for giving him into your hands." Saul and his men began the search, and when David was told about it, he went down to the rock and stayed in the desert of Maon. When Saul heard this, he went into the desert of Maon in pursuit of David. Verse 26. Saul was going along one side of the mountain, and David and his men were on the other side, hurrying to get away from Saul. As Saul and his forces were closing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul saying, "Come quickly, the Philistines are raiding the land." Then Saul broke off his pursuit of David and went to meet the Philistines. That is why they call this place Selah Hamalekot.
Yeah.
Selah Hamalekot. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of Engedi.
Well, actually, so let us kind of wrap up here. Essentially, what did David do? How did he protect himself from Saul? We already mentioned that when he recognized initially that Saul was no longer his friend, he stayed in the service, believing that he would be able to contain the enmity. At that time, it was probably the kind of things that happened he believed he could contain, or maybe he didn't fully understand where this was going. But when he realized that he could not contain, that the danger was too much, that if instead Saul would kill him one day, he left. And then after he left, of course, it was Saul confirmed what David felt, because as soon as he left, Saul declared war on David and pursued David wherever he could. So David did what he could to know what Saul was doing as much as possible. This is not easy, but that's one of the strategies. He has sources of information. The Bible doesn't expand on this, but he has sources of information. So this is part of what a mentee can do when you have this type of relationship with your mentor, previous mentor. Then, of course, his main strategy was to keep a safe distance between him and Saul. He recognized that Saul had the power to kill him. Saul didn't have the authority to kill him, but David didn't rely just on that. He knew that, Saul didn't have God had not given Saul the authority to kill David. But Saul was determined to kill David anyway. He wasn't interested in God's authority. So David didn't rely on that fact, but he knew about it. It encouraged him from time to time. But he made human effort, he took human actions, he applied his human skills to predict Saul's move and to stay away, to stay ahead of Saul so that Saul will not catch up with him. He chose avoidance from Saul. He chose to maintain a safe distance from Saul, and that is how he saved himself from Saul. And we'll go through the lesson. It's a very short lesson,
It is, but it's not how lengthy a study is that determines the message that it carries. And I believe that the message of today is very relevant in most of our human relations, because at one point or the other in our lives, we find ourselves in a relationship where we are looking up to, doesn't necessarily have to be older, but a more experienced person in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Or we find ourselves understudying somebody, either in a business relationship where you'll be taken as somebody that is being groomed or trained. We find ourselves in a position of trainer and trainee, or mentor and mentee. for those who, understand what that means. That's absolutely the case here. And what David chose to do is a good example of for us all. That when it turns sour, oftentimes in today's world, what most people will do will be to retaliate. Say, oh, this man or this woman wants to kill me.
Yeah.
I will undo you first. I'm going to kill you first.
Yeah.
So you turn around. But if you are in the purpose, in the will of God, and God has placed you in that place, there are some things that God wants you to learn there. And if David, you see that David, at a point he had to even begin to run away or hide from his own son, Absalom. So there are skills, and maybe there's something that God wants him to learn in this relationship. So going after him, after Saul, his mentor, wouldn't have been the ideal thing. But in our human mind, it would be, why don't you kill him? If he catches you, he's going to kill you, just like we said here. And we know that David was a skilled warrior. And if he wanted to kill Saul, he would kill Saul.
I believe that, yeah.
If he was set or determined to kill Saul, he would kill Saul. But he chose the alternative of, let me avoid him. One, I believe, is because he recognized, like you said, God's anointing on Saul. Saul, even though God had departed from him, was still on the throne of Israel.
Yeah.
And God said all we should have for the kings or leaders he has placed over us is to pray for them.
Yeah.
It's not to pull them down or to, but to pray for them and leave God to deal with them. So David, respected Saul's authority over him, and the anointing of God, or the enthronement that God, the crowning that God, that official seat where God has placed Saul, it meant something. And David did not want to kill his leader. So also when we have leaders who have suddenly turned against us, it is said that two wrongs never make a right, especially when you're in the position of a mentee. What the best you can do is to maintain your distance or take your leave, as David did. And God is going to do that fight for you. And I have seen that if what they're doing to you is the injustice or the evil is not warranted, you have done nothing to bring it upon yourself, God will do that for you, and you're in the will of God.
Yeah.
Now the other thing I want to mention here is that it's good to always seek God's counsel for each situation we face. Like David did. David, when he heard all that, he didn't just say, my men, let's run. Okay? He inquired of God first.
Yeah.
What will happen? Remember that Keilah was a Philistine stronghold that David went to defeat. So he could have said, Saul will be afraid to come and look for me here. Let me stay here. But he chose to ask God, will these people deliver me? Will Saul actually come here? He decided to seek God's counsel, and God answered him. He prayed, and God answered him.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
He sought God's face, and God answered him.
Yeah.
And then based on what God said to him, he decided to make his next move.
Yeah.
And that's what should be our guiding principle in everything, every decision we make. The Bible says we should not lean on our own understanding, but trust God in all our ways. Acknowledge him. Acknowledge means seek him. Yeah. Realize that he's there and that he's the one that you have to ask and talk to. Yeah. Finally, the other thing I looked at here is, you see, what Saul did and what David did were in contrast to each other. When Saul heard that David was in Keilah, he immediately said, wow, God has delivered David in my hands. He's in a walled city, so he can't escape. A walled city means, like you said, It's only the gate.
Yeah.
The walls, there's barricade and everything. You can't go anywhere except through the gates.
Yeah.
So all Saul needed was to mount his men at the gates and then surround the place,
Yeah.
and they'll catch David.
Yeah.
He assumed that was God's plan. That God delivering David was God's plan. But little did he know that wasn't God's plan.
Yeah.
Because when he thought he was going to, almost at the brink of catching David, God, sprung another one on him, which was, go back. Your country is being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if he had sought God's face, remember that Saul was no longer in God's book, good books.
No.
God had departed from him.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, this thing is not that, oh God, remember he was the one that rejected God first by trying to do the things without inquiring from God.
Yeah.
And so he made so many mistakes that made God say, no, I can't work with this man.
Yeah.
On the contrary, when David heard his own that Saul is to come to kill her, he said, God, what do I do? You can see the different reactions here.
Yeah.
And we can see the outcome.
Yeah.
One succeeded, the other one did not succeed.
Yeah.
So the story, is so clear that seeking God's face and going his way in every situation, seeking him first, is the right way.
Yeah.
Is the way of success.
Yes.
And Saul misunderstood what looked like a very convenient thing. It was so palatable that this day we say, it can only be God. It could only have been God that did this. Let's go and catch him.
Yeah.
But all that glitters is an addict says it's not gold.
Yeah.
So we have to weigh situations that look like, but it's not the real thing. I know we've talked about this before. Opportunities like that come up.
Yeah.
Remember the case of Ishmael and Isaac.
Yeah.
Ishmael looked like, but he wasn't the child of promise.
Yeah.
And God still said Ishmael must depart.
Yeah.
So things might look like that's what God wants. Oh, it is God that brought up this opportunity, but it's not God. First of all, check your motives. Secondly, inquire of God. Is this what you want for me? Should I go? Should I not go? David is very, very good at that. Seeking God's and inquiring God's face before doing anything. I think those are practical things I was able to pick up from this lesson.
Well, that's very good. That's quite a lot. We've actually gone through the study, so we all we need to do now is thank you for being with us. Let me turn this off first. Yes, we thank you for joining us in our programs, and we remind you of our website, bankingblessing.org, that everything we've done in the past and everything we'll do in the future is available at the website, and it's easy to find. We thank you for being our partner, and we pray that you learn something from our program that will make a positive impact on your life and will bring you closer to God's purpose to your life. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless.